Good afternoon, and welcome to our breakout session, True False Hot Cold, with filmmaker Ben Stillerman. I'm Elizabeth Dell, CCL Program Director and Great Lakes Regional Co-Director. A quick housekeeping item before we begin. The chat feature is set up only to send messages to designated hosts. If you have any questions during the session, please direct them to one of the people labeled Ask Me. We will also have about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end, and we'll be using the Q&A feature that you should see at the bottom of your Zoom window or perhaps under the More option. When you put questions in the Q&A, others on the call can upvote them so that we can better respond to questions that are of interest to the most people. We also may invite people to use the raise hand feature to ask questions depending on how many people are in the meeting. This session is about how to use films to foster discussions about climate change. So before handing things over to Ben, I want to briefly review why your chapter might consider hosting a film screening and share some resources that we have available on CCL Community to help with that. So, why host a film screening? Well, they are one of the outreach tools that many of our chapters have had success using. And with the winter months coming up, film screenings are a great indoor outreach option while tabling slows down. Film screenings give you a chance to engage with members of your community about climate action. They serve as an educational opportunity for your community to learn about climate change, CCL, and taking action. They're a great opportunity to collaborate with other local organizations in creating the event or inviting them to the event. And they're fun. There's a lot of great films out there that are entertaining, eye-opening, and ripe for starting conversations. Now, we could have a whole session just about the ins and outs of choosing a film and organizing and marketing the event. But today we're going to focus on Ben's short film series, True False Hot Cold. We've got a lot of training and resources on CCL Community, so I'd suggest checking that out for that deeper training on the more logistical side of organizing film screenings. There's also a film guide that includes a list of films you might consider screening depending on your audience. And Thad will put links to these resources in the chat. All right, now I am pleased to introduce Ben Stillerman. Ben is a documentary filmmaker with an interest in using media to bridge divides and a passion for teaching others to do the same. By focusing on interviews which foster curiosity, empathy, and dignity for both the subject and the interviewer. His latest documentary project, True False, Hot Cold, about climate attitudes in rural Utah, was partially funded by a Rogovi Foundation grant and is being launched in conjunction with a new nonprofit production company, the Social Cohesion Lab. Recently, he has screened his work and run Depolarization Day events for students at UC Berkeley, MIT, BYU, NYU, and Cornell. Born in South Africa, he credits the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Studs Terkel, and Frederick Wiseman among his biggest influences. You also may recognize Ben as the videographer at previous CCL summer conferences and lobby days, and we welcomed him as a speaker at the 2024 summer conference this past June to give us a sneak peek at his film series. We're excited to have him with us today to hear how the rollout of the project has been going and to learn how we can collaborate. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me. Throw notes in the chat if you're not hearing me. I'm going to share my screen now. So give me 1 second while I do that. Okay, and can I just get a thumbs up from someone if we can see it? Cool. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. As Elizabeth said, I am a CCL alum. I have a very, very deep love for CCL. It's really the place where I got started in the world of having conversations with people, partisanship. As some of you know, when I was chatting with you, if you were there in July, it was really meaningful to be back in front of a CCL audience. And today we're going to have a fun chat, but I'm also looking forward to some time for Q&A at the end. But yeah, let's jump in and get started. So, today's chat I called curious communication across big divides. That's kind of the angle at which we've done our film, and it's the angle at which I thought we could kind of talk about it today as well. That's kind of my biggest interest is how do we get better at having conversations with people who are different from us? And so that's kind of what we're going to look at a little bit today through the lens of the project we work on. And then we're going to take some time to look at how we might use the medium of film, both as a filmmaker, if you're an interested person, but also if you're just a person who wants to use these kind of creative assets in your work, engaging with people across divides. So just to get things started, thank you. I didn't realize I was going to get such a gushing, beautiful bio there. I'm blushing, but I'll give a slightly less effusive bio of myself. I'm Ben. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm originally South African. I've been living in the US for about 12 years now. Been making documentaries for most of that time, and mostly they're focused on speaking to people I disagree with in some way, and trying to kind of use the platform of documentary as a way to engage with people. CCL was kind of one of the originators of that. And when I spoke in July at the CCL conference, I showed a couple episodes. But this time around, for anyone who wasn't there in July, I'll do just a very quick overview of what the project is about. And we're also going to show the trailer, which we didn't show in July. So if you were there in July, we're not going to repeat anything that you've already seen. But if you weren't there, you should be able to catch up as well. And then we'll have a little chat about some of the skills and techniques we've kind of been using for our curiosity work, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A as well. So let's get started. So just to kind of jump things off, let me give you a little bit of a background about this documentary project in case this is the first you're hearing of it. It's called True, False, Hot, Cold. And it's a documentary about climate attitudes in rural Utah, in our case specifically, although I think it applies to large parts of the country and perhaps attitudes around the world in certain places. The place we filmed it was a county called Emery, which is, according to a Yale climate opinion survey that's done every year, this was a kind of one of the statistically most skeptical places in the country for opinions about that climate change is happening, that it's human caused, and that it's a big problem. So we thought it would be an interesting place to go and have a conversation. We ended up filming there for 4 months with a small crew of us. We did dozens of interviews over hundreds of hours. And we filmed with a huge range of people. We spoke to farmers and coal miners and church leaders and hunters and butchers and rodeo queens and truck drivers and many, many more different kinds of people. And we were incredibly moved by the richness of the stories that were told there. We didn't agree about everything, but we didn't go there necessarily to agree about everything. We went there to practice having conversations in order to understand where people are coming from, in order to kind of meet people where they are, and have these kinds of conversations. This is a community that is heavily dependent on cattle farming, on cattle ranching, and coal mining. Coal production and coal-fired power plants are some of the biggest employers in this very small county. And so we could tell immediately that it was an interesting place to go and have conversations. And we also found while we were there that it was just an incredibly charming place. People were very friendly, very hospitable, very down to chat, and very concerned about a lot of these topics in different kinds of ways. So what I thought would be fun is we'll show the trailer of the documentary now. I should say that the documentary is a series of 26 short episodes. So each episode's about 5 minutes long, 4 to 6 minutes long maximum. And they're all available online right now. And we're, as Elizabeth said, we're in the process of kind of putting this project out to audiences around the country and around the world. But for general audiences who are looking in, the project is available right now, and we'll send a link in the chat. There'll be a QR code at the end where if you want to go and watch all the episodes, you can. And also, you can just go to socialcohesionlab.org and you'll be very quickly able to click on True, False, Hot, Cold and watch all the episodes, or watch some of them, or watch a few of them, whatever you feel like. We'd love any engagement that you are interested in. So just to kind of get things started, I'm going to show the trailer. Give me 1 second to make it full screen, and let's see if hopefully the sound works. Maybe I'll get a few thumbs up again if the sound is working again. So I want to be completely honest. I read a survey that said that this county has statistically the least belief in climate change in America. And, you know, that's interesting. But I also don't want to pretend that I know what this county is about just based on that.
Is it false or is it true? Coal and gas and oil, they are polluting the environment. Now, whether it's enough to change the climate of the world, there's very few people I can trust to give me the answers to that.
I believe in climate change. You can see it around you. Do I believe our 2 coal-fired plants are horrible? No.
Is it hotter than you remember when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, I think it is.
If man could control this whole country would be 70 degrees.
This is a rural area. They like farming. They like having their cows and horses. There's a couple of llamas over there in that field.
We are a very small community that was built on our coal mining and our power plants.
There's a huge disconnect between urban settings and rural counties everywhere in the United States.
It feels like my county and my community and my way of life are being attacked, and I'm trying to help feed those people that are trying to shut me down.
Nothing against city people in that sense, but I'm probably more green than you'll ever be because I have to live with Mother Nature.
So let me do a little experiment for you. Ready?
Okay.
Tom, you're wrong about climate change. It's definitely caused by humans. I'm not a politician. I'm just like a guy who's panicking that people think differently to me. I'm sure about it. Did I change your mind?
Nope.
Why?
Do you like it when anybody tells you this is what you need to do? Even if you know you need to do it, it still pisses you off.
If you listen to me, I will give you the courtesy of listening to you. And my goodness, we're all human beings. We're going to find some common ground somewhere.
I don't know if I ever come to the truth. And if it's part truth, part lies, you got to hang on to something.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for watching that. Let me go to the next slide here. So yeah, as you can sort of see that, you know, that gives a little window into where we were kind of going with the project. We wanted to have honest conversations. We knew we weren't going to agree about everything. We wanted to maintain a sense of civility, a sense of dignity. We were interested in getting to the truth, but we were also accepting of the fact that truth looks different in different contexts, and that people feel things that are kind of very difficult to just point to a graph or a map and say, you see, you're wrong about this because it aligns with your personal experience. You know, the core question that we have been asking ourselves when we're making this project and when we're putting this content in front of different audiences, which I've written here in big on this slide, is how do we meaningfully connect with people who have different lives and different experiences to our own? Because what I realized very quickly, and what I'm sure anyone who's been doing this kind of work understands very, very quickly, is just shouting, well, you're wrong, you don't understand, let me tell you why you're wrong, and let me prove it to you with this news article or this, you know, YouTube video or whatever it is. It doesn't tend to work because, you know, people don't form beliefs that way. People don't form beliefs by some person knocking on their door in the middle of the day and saying, did you know that you've been wrong all this time about something that makes sense to you? The way that we've discovered that people form beliefs is, through a kind of slow combination of the experiences that they've had and the attitudes and beliefs of the communities in which they spend the majority of their time. And so in the process of making this project, we have kind of tried to ask ourselves, well, what kind of media then, what kind of conversational media at scale that we can put out into the world, that we can go put in front of audiences, would do that kind of work in a way that doesn't add polarization, add divisiveness around some of these big topics. Obviously, I personally have my own opinion about climate. I worked with CCL for a long time. You can probably guess what my opinions are, but that wasn't what this documentary was about for me. This documentary was about us working on how we have better conversations. And so in the process of developing this project, we started getting a sense that not only was there a kind of desire for the content itself, but also for sort of help in using the content. How do we then take this content and use it in some kind of way? We originally thought, well, we'll just make it and then people will use it. Well, we realized as we've been going that, when it comes to topics like polarization or controversial topics, that people need a little bit of support, they need a little bit of help, and they need to be put into the right context in order to use it. And so we formed this organization, Social Cohesion Lab, which for fun we're kind of calling media for people who don't hate their neighbors and don't want to either. And without being too flippant, basically the idea with Social Cohesion Lab is we focus on intellectual curiosity and using media to bridge ideological divides. And we do this, it's not very complicated. We basically make documentaries where we go engage with some people who have any particular opinion about something or any kind of life or belief. And then we run events where we go and put that content in front of audiences who have different beliefs to them. And then in a structured sort of conversational way, we ask people, how did it feel when you saw that? What did it feel like do you understand the logic of what these people are believing? And in so doing, we're creating dialogue that is a little bit more scaled than some of the bridging work that we've seen where, and absolutely there's a huge amount of value in organizations like Braver Angels, for example. There's a lot of work being done in this bridging space. We're trying to do something where we're saying, okay, you don't have to literally get up and go, if you live in Berkeley, California, you don't have to go to Tennessee to have this conversation. There's a way that you can still interact and feel connected, because media is such a kind of quick fire way into the heart of getting to understand someone, especially sort of interview documentary work where people are kind of really being honest, open, and vulnerable on screen. We found that it can really have a meaningful impact on audiences who might not have been expecting to understand this or sympathize with a farmer in Utah who's got a very different life and opinion to the community or the audience that's watching it. So, those audiences that we put it in front of get a chance to flex the muscle of being curious rather than defensive about different ideas or values or cultures. And, I should say that it's been really fascinating because people don't get a lot of opportunities to do this kind of work. We don't get a lot of opportunities to spend time in conversation or spend time engaging with people who really think very differently from us, unless you're the kind of person who says, I really actively want to go do this, because it's work and it's emotional work and can be quite vulnerable and quite a lot of sort of a challenge to get it done. And so that's kind of the origin of the organization that we've developed that's sort of grown out of this project. And I wanted to just kind of break down now just a little bit about, what we took from this project. As I sort of said, we learned a lot about how beliefs form. They form slowly. They don't form in a vacuum. They're formed by personal experience, and they're formed by the shared experiences of the community in which people spend the majority of their time. I'll give you an example just to kind of help it make sense. So several of the people we interviewed had relatives who died or were seriously injured in mining accidents, right? And we sort of thought, okay, well then, these people are going to like immediately understand that like, there needs to be, these are going to be prime candidates for an allyship to support a shift away from carbons, for example. These people are already, have been wounded by the extractive industries. But the reality was more complicated than that. They were also grappling with the fact that, if coal is taken away from their county, did their family member die for something that is not of value? There's a sense of, I feel pride about my family member. I don't want to hear that what they've been doing all this time was bad, And so that was kind of a nuance that we didn't fully expect to see. And there were many examples of that. A lot of farmers were very quick to understand that rivers weren't flowing the way they were 50 years ago because they've been there for way longer than 50 years. But you say to them like, well, should we do something about it? Yes, but I don't want it done by someone who's never spent time here, because the last time a law was passed, it was passed in Washington, D.C., and they had never spent time here, and they don't understand the land in the same way that I do. So there's these kind of nuances that really helped us understand that, like, if you want to do deep work connecting with people in a way to understand them, then it's got to be done through the lens of, well, help me understand who you are and what your experience is before it's me coming and telling you how things need to go. I wanted to just quickly chat a little bit about some of the skills and strategies we used. And I should say, it's not like we went in with a guidebook. This is how we have a dignified conversation. This is something that kind of came out organically over many years of having conversations with different kinds of people who have very different kinds of opinions about things. And for fun, you can take a moment and think about your own responses to this. If someone asked you to tell them about this topic, we always start an interview with a question about childhood, because everyone had a childhood. Maybe it was a hard childhood, maybe it was maybe it was a lovely childhood, but everyone had one. It's a way to kind of offer a connection. We also say, tell us about your hopes, or tell us about what you're scared of in the future. A lot of people share their fears. I'm scared of how my family is going to fit into whatever this new world becomes. That's a way for us to engage curiously before we even get to topics that are like, okay, tell me about your opinions about, climate change or carbon capture or, nuclear energy. We're nowhere near that at this stage. Tell me who you are as a person so that you can see that I care about you enough to give you the moment of dignity you're looking for, so that I could kind of connect with you about some of these other big topics, and you won't feel like I'm just out to use you and get my way. We'll ask people what they're proud of. You ask someone what they're proud of, you'll watch their eyes light up. Wow, you're interested. You care about me. Let me take a moment to reflect on that. And then you ask someone, how do you think you're doing? How do you think you're doing at the moment in your life? Do you think things are going well? Do you think you're struggling? Tell me what you're and watch how people can't. They're shocked. Oh, you really care? You're really interested? Of course, I want to tell you. Everyone wants to feel like their story is worth hearing. So those are some strategies that we used when we were kind of doing interviews, just to kind of forge a connection with people. The next slide is a lot of information. Feel free to screenshot it and don't try and read it all or whatever. But I made a little cheat sheet here that that we've used, just as a kind of way of communicating to people who are interested in perhaps doing interviews of their own, or perhaps kind of doing work as a journalist or as a citizen journalist, or you're writing an op-ed, or you want to go and record an interview with someone, or you just want to go and have a conversation with someone who you know is different from you. We've written down a kind of cheat sheet of how we sort of think about going about this. In the middle is some of those same guiding questions that I mentioned on the previous slide, moments in your childhood that shaped you, who the people in your life that have meant the most to you, what keeps you up at night. But, before you do that, you got to get in the right mindset. Are we in a time and place right now where we're going to be able to have this kind of conversation. Maybe this is just not the time. Maybe this is just not the place for us to have this conversation. Oh, we're on the bus, there's loud noises, and like they're leaving in one stop time. Probably not going to get into our childhood hopes and fears right now, you know? Oh, we're sitting like in our living room and we're comfortable and we've had a cup of tea together and we're like getting to know each other. Sure, now maybe this is a good time for some of these questions. And then, you know, some quick best practices that we sort of stand by. Obviously, it's hard when you're having a conversation with someone to not immediately want to jump in with your own opinion, you know? It's what's lucky about documentary film is the very process of doing the documentary means you have to be quiet because the microphone and the camera are pointed in one direction. So it's very easy for us to say, okay, we're not going to talk. It's your turn to talk. The camera's on you. But don't speak over someone else if you can help it. Let them get their words out. Let them get their thoughts out. And we find 9 times out of 10, when they've had the chance to do that, then you know, then they're happy to hear what you have to say once they feel like I got to say what I wanted to say. We limit our own opinions to start at least. We lead with support and enthusiasm. We nod, we smile a lot. That's really kind of your best friend is a lot of nodding and smiling. And don't just wait for someone to finish before you jump in. And importantly, give people the time to think about what their answers are. If there's a little bit of silence, sit in that for a little bit, enjoy that for a moment, and give them the time to think to themselves, you know, well, let me think about what my actual answer is, because I don't usually get the time to think about it. So, you know, as I was kind of saying, curiosity is really, you know, just such a kind of valuable asset to a person's life and to a society's life. We think about it kind of 3 levels, from small all the way to big. You know, in one sense, being curious makes for a richer, happier, more interesting personal life. At a larger scale, at an institutional level, it makes for more efficient, cohesive, creative teams, institutions, and groups. And I also think it's the foundation for more stable, unified, responsive societies. And so, you know, we really look at curiosity as a skill that is of huge value to be taught, and that really is one that can be learned. The documentary that we've done is just a version of curiosity that we think everyone should be engaging with in some kind of way. It doesn't have to be a documentary, but just chatting to your neighbors is probably a skill worth developing, especially when it comes to a topic like climate, where at the core of it is often personal fears, high stakes, and a sense of how am I going to connect with this person. I just want to turn, before we kind of wrap up this part of the conversation and give some time to the Q&A, for how to actually use this project specifically. And I should say, as the filmmaker, it's wonderful to screen the trailer in front of a big crowd like this. It was very meaningful screening some episodes at the conference. And it's really a lovely thought to think that it might be useful for groups and communities and individuals to use the project in some way. So I've made a few notes about how we might be able to use this project for CCL specifically, and for people who are just interested generally. And I thought the best way to maybe think about it was to break it down into the different audiences that might be interested in watching this project. So, you know, if we think about 4 different audiences, well, let's talk about each of them for just a minute. The first audience is probably this kind of audience. It's climate activists who are looking to understand diverse attitudes, you know, and looking for some sort of angles in which to have these conversations. So, you know, if you're one of these people and you want to organize a screening for another group of these kinds of people, you know, it's very easy for you to organize a screening at your home or send the project around to friends and family who you think might be interested. If you would like to do a screening, you know, at your home with a little bit of guidance of some conversation guides and resources, we're going to share a link at the end of this activity, at the end of this talk, where there's an educational handbook that you can click on and download for free. All the episodes are available for free. As I say, there's 26, but you definitely don't have to screen all of them. I would actually, in fact, highly recommend not screening all of them. All your friends will never forgive you if you screen all of them, because it's about 3.5 hours long. So, screen 3 or 4, have a little conversation, and go from there. The second way you might want to use the project is as a tool for bipartisan engagement. You can use the project and select specific episodes which you think might resonate with a crowd of different people. For example, we've done screenings with both climate activists and cattle ranchers in the room, and we chose specific episodes which we thought would be interesting to both and spark conversations. Again, you could use it for cold engagement. Someone at CCL suggested using this as a little hook for tabling. We'd only be too happy if people screened the trailer, for example, at a tabling event. If you want to rope people in off the street and ask them to watch something for 2 minutes, we'd be very happy if that was our trailer, and we can, we'd love to hear reactions from that. We've also got some questions you could ask in that sort of context in our educational guide. And finally, probably the sort of most obvious one, educational and institutional screenings. If you happen to be connected with or involved with organizations that are, schools, universities, local governments, other nonprofits that might be interested, we regularly host those kind of screenings, and you can also organize screenings like that for yourself. You screen it at a library. They're usually free to make a booking. Or if you're a university professor, please get in touch and we'll work out doing an academic screening, anything like that. You can get in touch with us directly through the link that will, I think it's been shared. It's the one socialcohesionlab.org/links, but it's also at the end of this slide. So yeah, those are some different ways that we can use it. And I'm open to other ideas. If people want to reach out and say, we'd love to do a screening on a boat, on a sailboat in the ocean, feel free to get in touch. We'll work something out. But just to kind of wrap up and give us a little bit of time, before we in the Q&A, I just wanted to kind of leave you with one thought, which is that, I guess if I could leave you with one thing, it's that engaging with difference is not a chore. It's not something that you have to do and you'd rather not do. It's not like eating broccoli. It's actually a gift to be enjoyed. It's something that's fun. It makes for a rich, it's the same reason that books and movies about interesting people or travel to interesting places is fun and makes you a richer person. And if you're the kind of person who's capable of truly engaging with diverse different ideas and peoples and attitudes and motivations, you'll be a far more successful leader and partner and friend and member of your community. At least that's what we found in making this project and what we find when we make projects like it. So I'm putting up here a QR code for a link to watch all the episodes if you do want to watch them. That'll send you to like a link list, and you can click on the full project, or you can also click on the educational guide. You can get some swag if you want to. You can sign up for our mailing list. There's a whole bunch of different links there. And I've put my personal email address there. So if you've got any questions about the project, please be in touch anytime. It's going to be out for the next several years as we keep developing Social Cohesion Lab generally. So what am I supposed to say? My producer told me, sign up for the email list, share online, donate, tell your friends, and check out our swag. Now my producer will feel like I've done my job on that front. And I think we've got about 9 minutes for Q&A, if I've got my timing right. I don't know if the hosts want to unmute or what the next step we should do for this is now.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. And well done in getting all of those final points in there. All right, we've got people have been putting some questions in the Q&A. So please go to the Q&A and upvote questions so that we can try to get through them as efficiently as possible and try to, again, get the questions that are of greatest interest. I'll go ahead and start with one from Beth. Have you shown the films to an audience in the county where they were filmed? And if so, what was the reaction?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. We did 2 screenings in Utah. We did one virtual one for the county members. Obviously, it's a large County. And so, we try to organize like an in-person event. It was a little bit challenging because one end of the county can be 2 hours drive from the other end of the county, even though there's only 9,000 people in the whole county. So we did a virtual event for everyone who was kind of in the small town communities itself, and that was great. We had nice feedback. People were a little bit, awkward, like, wow, I didn't really think you were actually doing this. The other funny thing about a documentary is, you go and you do an interview with someone, you spend 3 hours with them, you chat to them, maybe you spend the afternoon filming a little bit of their life. And then often you kind of don't see them again for like 2 years while you go off and edit the project. So they forget about it. They don't know who you are by the time it comes out. You have to remind them, remember you did this interview with us? Well, it turns out we actually did something with it. But no, we had a lovely screening for the community members, mostly very positive. And as I say, just a few people who were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you convinced me to actually be on camera. I hate the shirt I was wearing. But for the most part, very, very positive. And then we did a screening at BYU, which is about an hour's drive from the county, and was really cool too, because Provo is an interesting intersection of urban and rural, and we really had a nice opportunity to talk with students and professors and faculty and staff who were connected in a way that was deeply sort of meaningful to them. We showed different kinds of episodes than we've screened at other universities, and I think it was really enjoyable and meaningful for us too.
Okay, great. And Ben, if you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then we'll be able to see you a little better.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Similar, well, kind of related to that question, did you let the people that you interviewed in Utah know ahead of time that you were going to be asking them questions about climate change?
Yeah, so, it was like a bit of a dance, because obviously you don't show up at their front door and say, tell me your opinions about climate change on camera right now. That's not going to work. So it was a process where there was a lot going on in that county in the kind of nature, conversations about pollution, conversation about land use that was like pre and adjacent to climate change conversations. So people already were having conversations about stuff like, is this land going to be used for farming, or is it going to be used for recreation, or is it going to be kept aside as like an eco-protected zone? And so we started out by having those kinds of conversations a little bit, like, do you feel connected to nature? Do you feel like the nature in your community has been sort of well maintained and looked after by your government and by your fellow farmers? Like those kinds of conversations. And then once we had built up a certain amount of trust, we sort of started getting into some of those climate conversations. And we also realized, some people haven't really given it a whole lot of thought and weren't so much not believers as it just didn't sort of factor in the same way that we thought it would. And when we started having the conversation, they were like, I'm interested. Tell me what your thoughts are. I'm probably not going to go out and like join Greenpeace this week, but I am interested in what you have to say. So it was kind of a range of reactions when we started talking about the climate stuff.
Okay. I want to say that I loved when I saw the slides that you had prepared. I loved that you had curiosity there, because that is like my word of the year. I just think it is such a helpful way to try to remind yourself. It's still hard to do, but being curious is so important. And Debbie was asking a question about the challenge of having conversations with people. She's liberal and she lives in a very red state. And so she was wondering, how did you open up a conversation so that a person would stop long enough to listen? And I mean, you shared some ideas, but I mean, maybe kind of along the lines of this, can you think of examples in just sort of your personal life where you have had a conversation, and how did that unfold?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing that I often remind myself is not every person needs to have every conversation every time. So sometimes you're the person to have the conversation with that other person about that topic. Sometimes that's just not going to work. If the person you're speaking to and you are too far apart that day or that year, you don't have to feel bad if that conversation is not viable. It's okay. Like a lot of these conversations are really hard. An example, I mean, my wife was raised in a very, very, specific religion, and she just like can't have that conversation with her mom about that topic anymore. It's just like that's not going to be their topic that they're going to be talking about. I could have that conversation with her mom because that doesn't stress me out. She could have a conversation that I can't have. We all have to sort of ask ourselves honestly, like, what is going to be a viable conversation, a dignified conversation where we're going to come out of it with a certain amount of, curiosity and generosity rather than defensiveness from it. And it's a process. It's a process. Sometimes we'd have conversations with people, and halfway through they'd be like, I'm done. I don't want to have this conversation. And you got to say, okay, that's fine. You're not being strapped down to the chair to have this conversation. We're not here to try and trick you into talking when you don't want to. No one's gonna talk to you if they don't want to talk. And so you have to be open to saying, I'll meet people where they are when they're ready, and sometimes I won't be ready, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Let's see. So Leslie is asking, what's the next step after understanding the other person's point of view? For example, if she shows the film to her community of a community of people who are concerned about climate change, what do you recommend or suggest in his next steps? And maybe you can say a little bit more about these depolarization days. I don't know if that kind of, how those two things might connect.
Yeah. So, it's a very big challenge that I think tons and tons of people and organizations are wondering about all the time. We can tell that there is a massive amount of divisiveness in this country and worldwide about a lot of big topics. My logic is, well, it's not working very well for us to not have the conversation. So let's start by having the conversation. In my case, I think back to Arlie Hochschild's an academic who wrote a great book about called Strangers in Their Own Land, about going to go speak with similar communities in the South. And she said, I think about my job as a translator. So my job is to go off, have these conversations, take the time to like synthesize them down to like, what are some of the data points that like I'm picking up by having these conversations? What kind of messaging is working? What's not working? What are we misunderstanding when we're saying, well, let's help these people in this way and they don't want to do it, And she then takes that information back to her university or back to her community and says, okay, look, this is like what's going wrong, and this is what I think where there might be some opportunities. I sort of think about this work that I'm doing in a sort of similar way, like as a translator between different groups. It's not that I necessarily want to now say, okay, now that I've convinced you to have a conversation and we're being curious, now I need you to change my mind. The process of at least learning to speak the same language to each other to some degree, and by speaking the same language, I mean a language of generosity, a language of shared dignity, a language of shared respect, that like you are a person and your beliefs are as valid as my beliefs in a certain sense. That is at least the first step. I think the second step from there is, when we're developing policies, when we're developing proposals for ideas or infrastructural changes, at least we will have a good sense of context about how these different communities are going to engage with it, what they're going to need in order to embrace it, in order to turn someone who looks like at the outset they're going to be a defensive into some sort of ally. And I guess this is like the sort of point that I'm really can answer in a sort of blunt way. I actually think the issue that we've run into with climate and with a lot of these topics is that changes feel like threats because people feel very unstable in their life in general. And any kind of change can feel like a threat when you feel like you're just holding on. And so if we're able to understand that in a deep way, and communicate, look, this is why I don't think this is going to be a threat for you. This is not going to destabilize you. Then I think we've got a better chance of connecting over these topics. And I should say, if you don't have a good answer to that, if the answer is, no, actually, when we shut down these coal plants, it is going to destabilize your entire community, then you need to have a good answer when someone says, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Well, okay, here's some ideas about what we can do about that. That's kind of my instinct about what the next step is it's translation, and then it's using that kind of empathy in forging policies and proposals that really kind of take that empathy into account. I'm not a politician, so I hope that kind of is a viable response.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you. And it just kind of, fits with our general theme. This is a great tool for us. So thank you so much for sharing this. Really appreciate your time this afternoon and all the great resources that you have to share. Thanks to everybody for joining the session. The conference closing session is happening in 4 minutes on the main webinar line. We'll be joined by Pennsylvania House Representative Chrissy Houlihan, co-chair of the House Climate Solutions Caucus, and Adam Met, musician from the band AJR and executive director of Planet Reimagined. So you will need to leave this meeting and join the main webinar line. And the chat, or the link is in the chat, or you can go to cclusa.org/mainstage to get back to the main line. And the breakout room is going to close here in just a couple of minutes. So thank you again, Ben, and everybody for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.